Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 27th of February. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay up to date on your very latest and local weather information. You can do that anytime by calling the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. Once you click on that, you'll get your local weather information from the Weather Forecast Office in your part of Alaska, whether that's Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage. Of course, you're just one click away from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit and the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. All that information gauging the amount of ice in the rivers there, and of course the amount of snow that's been falling in your community. Very important, taking us into the spring and eventually the summer. But if you want to keep up to date on what's happening tonight as far as wind goes, you can certainly get the very latest forecast information that way with one click. Now, another thing we love to see from your part of Alaska is your video and your pictures. And thanks so much to Bob Swenson up on the Diamond Ridge area of Homer. He sent this video in yesterday. Wind and snow there. I believe there was some thunder snow near Homer. Now, if you're saying, what is thunder snow? We don't get that too much. Many parts of Alaska don't get that many thunderstorms in general in the summertime. This was a thunderstorm in the wintertime, and just like a thunderstorm in the summer produces rain, this produces some pretty torrential amounts of snow and wind, and this is the result there. Near blizzard conditions in some cases there, pretty strong gusts and estimates of 50 to maybe 80 miles per hour of wind in the Homer region there. Not sure how fast it was blowing from Bob's view, but certainly some drifting snow and some new snow falling in the Diamond Ridge area near Homer. So thanks so much for sending that in, Bob. Really love to see your pictures. Anytime you want to send a picture or a video, just send that to david.snider@noaa.gov, and we'll see what we can do about getting it on the show. Love to see and show your parts of Alaska. Here's what's going on tonight. The focus for snow is going to be back around Mud Bay and Haines for southeast as we head into tonight from 9 o'clock until about 9 a.m. tomorrow. There's a winter storm warning, and it looks like you could see anywhere from 7 to 9 inches of snow, especially around Mud Bay, probably a little less around Haines. And then as you get out toward the outer coast around Pelican, you're probably talking about 4 to 7 inches of snow. Winter weather advisory's been posted for you. A look up north, we're continuing the winter weather advisories for the interior. So for Fairbanks, North Pole, all the way down toward Deltana, Tanana Flats region, Salcha, out toward Tanana, Bettles, Arctic Village, this entire region is going to continue under at least some light snow, probably an inch or two at most, but the bigger factor is going to be the wind across the summits. And at elevation, then you're talking about some stronger gusts above 30 miles per hour. That means limited periods of half-mile visibility. So if you folks are traveling up and down the Dalton Highway, going over the summits, expect there to be a brief period of pretty poor visibility, and then once you get down off the hill, things should get better. We've got winter weather advisories also for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, Kobuk and Noatak valleys there, where more snow is expected into tonight and tomorrow. Winter storm warnings continue for the Seward Peninsula and the Selawik Valley region. And then we still have blowing snow areas for winter weather advisories for blowing snow around St. Lawrence Island and the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and the Bering Strait region. But on top of that, outside of what's happening right now, as we get into Wednesday night and Thursday, we're adding in a blizzard watch for St. Lawrence Island and the Yukon Delta. And in some parts of St. Lawrence Island and the Yukon Delta, you could see easily as much as 8 inches to about a foot of new snow. That is toward the end of the week again, Wednesday night or Thursday night and into Friday. And again, blizzard watch has been posted for your area. So a lot going on with a very active weather pattern. Let's get right to it. As we look at the satellite picture, you can see one wave of colder air dropping southward. Now, part of the reason we're going to have the wind and the poor visibility across the interior summits is because of this surge of colder air dropping down. This is really going to blast south central with some cold air, and it's part of the reason that there's going to be a burst of snow across northern parts of southeast as we get into this afternoon, this evening, and early tomorrow morning. Out west, you can see another force of cold air coming across the western Bering and the North Pacific as that frontal boundary makes its way towards Shemya. That's probably where we're going to see the strongest winds and impacts on the marine areas. A lot of this, though, will really fizzle out across the central and western Bering, and that front's going to break apart. So a lot going on here in a complicated weather pattern. Colder air first is pushing southward. You can see that generating an awful lot of snow across the west and southwest and into the interior. Areas of rain across the Gulf, and then rain and snow across parts of southeast. Here's that powerful front. The low behind it's 955 millibars. As we get into tonight, the pressure gradient across south central is going to pick up. We're going to watch for some wind around the Valdez area. You'll notice how tight this gradient is across Prince William Sound and even across Cook Inlet and the Barren Islands down toward Kodiak Island. The front's working its way into southeast, so for about 12 hours or so, you're going to have a really good setup of snow across northern parts of southeast. We were talking about Haines and especially the Mud Bay area there, and also Pelican. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good setup for you. Areas southward, you may see some snow. It probably won't be nearly as much, though, as Haines and Mud Bay and Pelican. Out across the Alaska Range, watch for areas of light snow to continue. And again, the wind is really going to be the issue there as we get into Wednesday. High pressure is trying to set up, but it's going to take a little bit of time. It's also forcing a lot of that wind down through southeast. So watch for the winds to come up across the inner channels and the outer coast as we go through your Wednesday. Snow showers continue across the Kobuk and Noatak areas. And again, this is not the reason that we're talking about blizzard watches. That's later. That's as we get into Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday. You can see the low now is down to 952 millibars as that front's moving to the north and east. And then by Thursday, that pressure gradient is really stacked and packed across Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, the Bering Strait, with another area, the Triple Point here, still south and west of Sand Point. So as this is working southward, we have a very long fetch of southerly winds working up the entire west coast. And this is a really good setup, not only for snow in St. Lawrence Island and around the western part of the Bering Strait and the Yukon Delta. Remember, we're talking about somewhere on the order of 8 to 12 inches of snow when this comes through, and so that's why the blizzard watch is posted. But as we get into about Thursday night and into Friday, the Kobuk and Noatak area is going to be in that deep southerly flow as well. This is a really good position for a lot of snow in villages in that region. So keep your eyes on the weather here across northwestern Alaska, the Yukon Delta, St. Lawrence Island. Wind and snow and more of it coming your way. As we get into Thursday afternoon and evening, notice that pressure gradient is still really tight here across the Lynn Canal and through the central and southern inner channels as well. So high pressure out across the western Yukon, you know the drill. This is going to be a lot of air moving through your region. The snow should be winding down by this point, but there's still going to be an awful lot of wind blowing through, so aviation concerns with that. Low pressure out across regions of eastern Siberia and west of the Gulf of Anadyr. The low is filling in, so the wind should start to diminish as we get into the central and western Aleutians by Thursday afternoon, but there's still going to be periods of snow showers, at times mixing with rain around Adak and Atka. So the primary concern there would be the wind more than anything else. And then rain briefly for parts of the Bristol Bay region. Once you get a little bit further north into the Kuskokwim Delta, chances are a lot of that is going to mix over to rain and snow, and then eventually all snow, and some of that fairly heavy as we get into the Yukon Delta and points northward. So an awful lot going on. Remember, you can always check these maps anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/TV. Here's a look at low temperatures tonight across southeast. 20s to low 30s across the outer coast. Most areas will be well below freezing, including the capital city. Around Prince William Sound, about 10 degrees there, in the low teens for most of Cook Inlet, 23 around Kodiak. Once you get into the interior, remember that big burst of cold we were looking at? Yeah, it looks like most areas are diving into the sub-zero range, anywhere from 5 to about 20 below for many locations south of the Yukon. North of the Yukon, 20 to 30 below easily, and across the North Slope, anywhere from 20 to 30 below there as well. Kaktovik about 15 below, Barrow 19 below, 0 in Nome, 20 around St. Lawrence Island, Savunga and Gamble included. McGrath about 12 below. Not too bad for you, anywhere from 5 below to 5 above in Bristol Bay. And the Alaska Peninsula, most areas there in the upper 20s to lower 30s. The central and western chain in the upper 30s there. High temperatures for your Wednesday afternoon, anywhere from 5 below to about 15 below for most of the upper Yukon Valley and the Yukon Flats, anywhere from 5 to 15 below for the North Slope. The Chukchi Coast, about 5 to 10 above. Kotzebue, looking at about 7. Shishmaref near 14. Nome, expect a high around 15 degrees. Unalakleet near 14. Galena about 8. The Bristol Bay region and southwest coast, teens and 20s there, 32 in Kodiak, and southeast in the 30s to about 40 degrees. Much colder Thursday morning for many, anywhere from 30 to 40 below for the Yukon Flats and the interior. South central single digits to sub-zero readings, including Kenai, Anchorage, all the way into the Parks Highway system and the Susitna Valley there. Prince William Sound single digits, 25 for Nunivak Valley or Nunivak Island, and single digits remain across the Middle Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Flats as we go into Thursday afternoon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather now, IFR conditions will stretch out across the western Bering ahead of a fast-moving front. This is all part of the very progressive system we have across the entire state right now. So conditions will improve in the east and parts of southeast and worsen in the west, and you'll see that trend repeat again as we go through the rest of the week. Look for IFR conditions across the higher train and some of the inside passages of southeast, lingering across the upper Yukon and maybe just a very scant amount of the upper Tanana Valley. Improving conditions across most of the interior briefly on Wednesday, and then once again worsening conditions out west. You can see how things continue to improve across the upper Yukon Valley, parts of the north slope of the Chukchi Coast, the upper Tanana and upper Yukon Valleys, and parts of southeast really improve as we go through Wednesday afternoon. And that IFR band is stretching from Adak to about Atka and running into Nikolsky, St. Matthew, and St. Lawrence Island as we get into Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday, it's just past the Pribilof, stretching all the way now from Wales and Tin City down toward Port Clarence, Nome, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, and just to begin to approach the YK Delta, making it into the Yukon Delta, in fact, and the western end of the Alaska Peninsula. We see just a very scant amount of any hint of MVFR across southeast. We will see increasing areas of MVFR across the middle Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley, and by Thursday afternoon, that's improved again. We're still looking at MVFR hit and miss across the Gulf, but absent for southeast, and IFR stretching all the way through the Bering Strait and the Chukchi Coast, the YK Delta, as well as parts of southwest and into Bristol Bay, and IFR down towards Sand Point, with MVFR fairly widespread now across most of the Bering Sea. Here's your pass conditions in detail. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see MVFR transitioning to VFR conditions by the afternoon tomorrow, so look for improvement there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look pretty good really all day long on Wednesday. Rainy Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions at least in the morning, but remember, as we move into Wednesday, a lot of the interior will see that improvement before we start to look at the next wave coming across the Bering and into the interior. So you got a couple good days there. Windy Pass, MVFR to VFR conditions are expected. Isabel Pass, we expect marginal ceilings and visibility to start your Wednesday, but a quick improvement to VFR. And the same goes for Mentasta Pass. Actually, a pretty widespread area of MVFR in the morning, but then looks like improvement there throughout the day. Tanita Pass and Portage Pass should both be pretty good for your Wednesday. Chilkoot and White Pass looks like an IFR start, but as we saw, another probably couple days of pretty good ceiling and visibility as we get toward the end of the week. Freezing levels, that big surge of southerly flow that's increasing that area of IFR is also bringing the freezing levels up from 2,000 feet to just west of St. Matthew to the Pribilofs to as high as 10,000 feet plus south of the central chain. Surface freezing line sitting across southeast, dropping south of Kodiak Island to about Sand Point, and then splitting the difference between St. Paul and St. Matthew Island there for your Wednesday morning. Icing potential is pretty high up there out in the west. Remember that strong southerly surge is driving that heat in to the Chukchi. It's chewing up the ice down below. Up above, it's sending those freezing levels way up high, and the moisture there meeting up with any potential cold. It starts out around 3,000 feet across the leading edge, but then jumps to about 10,000 feet as you get to around St. Matthew, St. Lawrence Island, and the YK Delta. So watch for some big changes there. Behind that, when the cold air starts to flow back in, you're getting to about 5,000 feet and above. Southeast, the remaining moisture there across southern parts of the Panhandle is bringing us an icing risk generally above 3,000 feet, and just a lingering area across the eastern Brooks, isolated moderate potential there above 2,000 feet. What about the jet stream? We keep saying this is a pretty progressive pattern. What that means is these fast-moving waves in the upper atmosphere are just slinging storms out, like if you had a pack of cards and you're just kind of doling them out. That's kind of what the weather's doing right now. We have this wave of weather traveling quickly from west to east. This is a cold and unstable pool of air. This is the ridge of high pressure, a little bit more stable here coming across the Bering, and then this is the next surge already building in wind speeds there between 150 and 190 knots, but we're going to have a midweek period with some significant cold dropping southward. So on Wednesday, look for that northwesterly flow to really take shape. 30 to 50 knots across the interior, 25 to 35 knots across the north and east. Low pressure still lingering around Haida Gwaii, so an offshore flow at 9,000 feet for southeast, and strong southerlies across the Aleutians between 50 and 70 knots. At 3,000 feet, 40 to 50 knots here across the west, 60 knots just south of the Gulf of Anadyr. High pressure across the west coast and more of a north and westerly flow from the north slope. There's our offshore flow for southeast, 40 to 50 knots there. Turbulence will linger across southern southeast, considerable moderate there, and for south central, the Alaska Range, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound, perhaps a little bit of isolated severe across St. Matthew, and considerable chop for the chain.
It used to be that you could only warn one person about a tornado after it had already blown down someone else's barn.
Now, on average, we're able to issue a tornado warning 15 minutes before the tornado's even there, and that wouldn't be happening without Doppler radar.
This NexRad system has reduced fatalities on the order of 45% due to tornadoes since its advent.
We have a lot more information now about storms and being able to understand how they develop, how they produce severe weather, and how that information might be used to improve warnings for our National Weather Service partners.
The lab is unique in that we serve the nation by supporting the National Weather Service in its mission to protect lives and safe property by improving the accuracy and the lead time of severe weather warnings.
We have a legacy of radar research and converting existing technology from military to weather purposes.
A recycled Doppler radar led to the development of NexRad, installed nationwide in the early 90s. It allowed forecasters to see storms like never before.
Not only did we help bring that technology to the National Weather Service and to help protect lives and property, but we have continued to upgrade that technology, keep it relevant, and keep it state-of-the-art.
Recently, a major upgrade was added. Dual polarization technology takes the radar from 2D to 3D. Forecasters now know more about what type of precipitation is falling, which is very helpful during winter storms, as well as how much rain is accumulating, resulting in better flash flood warnings. The radar can also detect and track tornadoes based on debris. Looking to the future, the National Severe Storms Lab is testing the capabilities of phased array radar. Originally used by the U.S. Navy, the antenna scans the skies electronically rather than mechanically, allowing the radar to focus on a storm.
With current technology, we get a full picture or image of what is going on within a storm every 4 to 5 minutes. So it's more like a snapshot. Whereas with phased array radar, we get that picture of what's going on in the storm every minute. So it becomes more like watching a movie. So we can do adaptive, rapid scanning on the storms that matter most, being able to provide the information that's most relevant when and where it's happening.
Another advantage of phased array radar is its multifunction capability, providing weather and air traffic information simultaneously.
Number one, it is a system that promises to replace and expand upon the existing weather surveillance radars. Secondly, to replace aging air traffic surveillance radars. And number three, it offers the potential application to meet Department of Homeland Security and defense requirements for identifying and tracking non-cooperative aircraft. With the replacement of all these various radars with a single system, the American taxpayer could realize substantial savings in cost.
You have a lot fewer radars to maintain, and the electronic capability of this also reduces maintenance costs because you do not have moving parts.
Not too long ago, the ability to predict severe weather was thought to be impossible. During the past several decades, research conducted at the National Severe Storms Lab has developed life-saving tools like Doppler radar. We've progressed from no warning of threatening weather to about a 15-minute lead time, and current research promises to extend that much further.
Our knowledge of severe storms and how they behave, and our use and ability to use the Doppler radar technology is in a lot of cases a direct result of that close working relationship, that research to operations component that we get between the National Severe Storms Laboratory and a forecast office.
That history and understanding of how these data can be used by our users and doing the research to help advance the use of radar technology, really it's what we live for, it's in our lifeblood, it's in our history.
It's now easier than ever to be a part of weather research. We just launched the mPing app for both iPhone and Android users, and it's totally free. PING, which stands for Precipitation Identification Near the Ground, is a research project by the NOAA National Severe Storms Lab and the University of Oklahoma. With the mobile app, you can send us your weather observations on the go. Are snowflakes falling on your head? Is hail hitting your car? Just select what type of precipitation is falling and press submit. It's that easy. It takes about 5 seconds and it's anonymous. Reports can then be viewed online. Our scientists will compare your report with what the radar has detected. This helps us develop new radar technologies and techniques. Download the app today, share your reports, and let's work together to make our nation weather ready. Learn more here and follow us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time again for a quick check of your sea ice edge, and if you've been paying attention the last couple days out west, you'll notice there wasn't a lot of ice here just a few days ago, and now it's filled back in. But keep in mind, a lot of this ice is pretty thin stuff, not the thicker ice that we'd normally see for this time of the season. The bluer areas are concentrations less than 80%, so there is higher concentrations back, but the thickness is not that thick. The other problem is we have another storm coming in from the west, and this is going to disrupt a lot of the ice that you see across the Bering Strait communities and from the Yukon Delta westward. So watch for more changes. There's a decent likelihood that a lot of this will be broken up into at least areas north of St. Lawrence Island, maybe even further north into the Chukchi Sea. Here's a look at southeast. Remember with the surface charts we saw, and you'll see them again here in just a minute, there was a lot of wind moving over south and east. So here we go. The Lynn Canal, northerlies 45 knots with 8-foot seas, 15 to 30 knots heading southward from Stevens Passage into Clarence Strait. Offshore flow all the way up into Icy Cape and around Yakutat, 25 to as high as 45 knots from south to north, and 12 to 14-foot seas up north on Wednesday. You'll notice the gusts are back in Stevens Passage up to 50 knots as we get into Thursday. Northerlies in the Lynn Canal will continue. Strong gusts coming out of Cross Sound up to 60 knots there with 13 to 15-foot seas, 14-foot seas as you go up toward Yakutat, and about the same there as you get out toward the Dixon entrance, but sustained winds down to about 25 knots on Thursday. Inside of Prince William Sound, northerly sustained at 30, gusts coming out of the Hitchinbrook entrance and out of the Copper River Delta at 55 knots with 12-foot seas there. That diminishes a little bit outside of Resurrection Bay. Northeasterlies coming over the ice in Cook Inlet, and northwesterlies really picking up across the Barrens, 40 to 45 with 12 to 14-foot seas there on Thursday. Winds are going to diminish a little bit more on Thursday. Look for seas coming down to about 6 to 7 feet inside of Prince William Sound, and not just on the outside as well. Northeasterlies coming down the southern end of Cook Inlet, 25 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas there. Northwesterlies east of the Barren Islands, and northerlies out of the Resurrection Bay area. Northwesterlies will be a little stronger across Kodiak Island, 30 knots over Shelikof Strait, 40 knots just to the south and east into the open waters, 11 to 13 foot seas there, 6 to 7 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast. Easterlies inside of Bristol Bay there with a 15 knot wind. On Thursday, that picks up a little bit more from the south and east. You'll get a stronger southerly flow in advance of that larger storm out west. Notice northeasterlies turn inside of Shelikof Strait, 20 knots with a 5 foot sea. Northwesterlies east of Kodiak Island with 6 foot seas, and the southerlies are creeping into Castle Cape and Chignik. For the west, central to western areas of the chain are going to see the stronger winds first. And notice the Attu, Shemya, Kiska, all the way looking southerly winds. They're 55 knots, 34 foot seas already. So again, a big push of wind coming through. South and southeasterlies are picking up on Wednesday. You can see the higher seas moving into the central and northern part of the Bering. And remember what I said earlier in the show, that a lot of what we're going to see with this front is it kind of dying off across the central and western Bering. So a lot of that surge is not going to make its way across the chain or into southwestern Alaska. So there's some good news there. West and southwesterlies will diminish on Thursday, 20 to 30 knots. You're looking at 9 to 12 foot seas across the central chain and 18 to 19 foot seas across the west. 14 to 16 foot seas across the Pacific coastline there on Thursday. For the west coast, southeasterlies are going to pick up as we get into Wednesday. 35 to 40 knots, looking to 8 to 20 foot seas out across the St. Matthew Island waters. St. Paul, St. George, you're looking at 35 knots with a 14 foot sea. And again, that ice edge is pushing southward just a little bit more though. As we get into Thursday, southerlies are still there, 35 to 40 knots in many locations. South St. Lawrence Island, 40 knots over the ice. Southerlies around St. Matthew with 23 foot seas and 14 foot seas for the Pribilofs. Look at the southerly winds outside of the Kuskokwim Delta, 40 knots with a 12 foot sea. Across the Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to as high as 30 knots over the ice with that stronger westerly flow. South and westerlies across the Chukchi Sea, 15 to 20 on Wednesday. Up to Thursday, we get a stronger southeasterly flow, and we start to see the effects of some of that open water once again. So plan on some changes north of the Bering Strait, and easterlies picking up from 15 to 25 knots across the Beaufort Seacoast on your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, a high wind watch now has been posted for Valdez starting tonight and tomorrow morning. Gusts there up to 80 miles per hour. Winter storm warning around Haines and Mud Bay. You could see as much as 7 to 9 inches of snow. Pelican, about 4 to 7 inches of snow. Winter weather advisory there. Widespread winter weather advisories, mainly for the summits of the interior, but you could see gusts up to 30 miles per hour, which means poor visibility for times. Blizzard warning out west, winter weather advisories out across the west, and a blizzard watch for St. Lawrence Island and the Yukon Delta as we get into Thursday and into Friday. So stay tuned on the weather there. More to come. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.